And we are live. Hey, Brian, how are you doing?
Morning. How are you?
Good, 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 good. Hey, it looks like the last session, people really loved it. I mean, the whole idea of, kind of generating, pipelines through C sharp, that's the beauty of these sessions, right? You get to kind of show people the tips and tricks end to end, right? It's not a particular topic, and just for the people watching, these videos are not like hello world kind of videos. I'm actually showing you, the whole end to end enterprise level systems that we build. So, Brian, what are we doing today? Let's go to the issues and let's see what's happening. How are you doing, by the way?
Oh, I'm doing good, my friend. It's pretty early for me. It's still dark outside.
A little darker outside. It's 12 o'clock over here. So for you it's a little bit
Six
later unless yeah.
6 a.m. Yep.
Wait, 6 a.m.?
Yes.
Oh, bro. Okay, we're gonna need to fix that. I need to make it a little bit later. I'm trying to kind of match. I'm trying to find that sweet spot where everyone can join because just for the people watching, the standard community are all over the place, right? They're in, Australia. There we have people from North America and South America. We have people in England, Germany. We have people, all over Uzbekistan, all over the place. So I'll try to find the right time for everybody. So speaking of which, just for the people watching, we're gonna do a lot of these streams, that actually build these projects and stuff like that. And one thing that I want you to be aware of, there is something called the standard calendar, and the standard calendar basically shows you all the events, the upcoming events that are happening in a particular week or a particular month. So if you go like this, it'll tell you, oh well, there's a session at this time. Here's another session at this time. This course in Chicago time. Why did I make it Chicago? It should be Seattle like here. So that's of course my time, but you can do the same thing for your kind of view. Depends on which city you're in. I'll post the link in here just for everybody. So here is tiny URL, the standard calendar, and that's like a shared calendar, right? That's a shared calendar with everybody there. So why did it not post? Did I get banned or something? Let's see here. It would be hilarious. I can't post on my own channel. That's crazy. Okay, well, it's up here. I don't know why it's not posting, but it's up there. Okay. So, okay, so if you want to see the sessions, there's some sessions about OData Neo. We're also discussing SPAL, standardized provider abstraction, and I'm gonna kind of, fix that calendar a little bit for the community so people can watch it whenever. And if you miss it for whatever time zone you're in, you can always kind of just go ahead and watch the recording, and if you really want to engage with us, we'll actually adjust the time for you to fit your time zone so you didn't end up at 6 in the morning. I'm so sorry, Brian. I did not know that. I didn't calculate. I didn't put two and two together at all. So anyway, what are the issues that we're working on today? So I created a bunch of issues, right? And these issues are around, the completion. So listen, guys, this is where it gets a little bit serious, right? We have a established the infrastructure. It was all good and dandy, but now we want to have this infrastructure actually do something useful to talk to, OpenAI, API and all that. But first and foremost, we have this thing here, Brian. We know that we want something, and let me just adjust this. I want something that looks like this. So there's C sharp code, and I want to go and say var OpenAI equal new OpenAI, and I want to pass in here API key like this. So I want my key to go here, and maybe organization as optional to also go here. So that kind of begs a question of, this OpenAI little component, all everything else is going to be built underneath that, right? So how do we store these secrets if we're not working in ASP.NET Core application, your classic ASP.NET Core application? So you're not really, able to have an app settings.json. You're not able to have, the whole registration of services and all that. I mean, we could always pull the containers. One suggestion that I have and something that I've been playing with, and let me show you here what I'm thinking, is to basically go and say, let me let me spin up a quick console application here for everybody, and then I'll explain to you And this is another piece that you're going to use a lot if you are building something that's not necessarily ASP.NET Core. You're building something that is, kind of a console application or a web, a library or whatever the case may be. And you don't have this kind of dependency injection magic that ASP.NET Core gives you outside of the box. So, okay, here we are. Brian, can you see my screen?
I certainly can.
Okay, here's the console. Okay, here we are. Oh, and it's posting now. It posted like 50,000 times. Okay, so you can see tinyurl.com, the standard calendar. I think it was doing a silent refresh. Look at all these people from Spain, New Zealand, Puerto Rico. Hey, Brian, are you having an anxiety attack?
Yeah.
Because I am. Okay, so
This is your idea to do it live. Wow.
yeah, this is your idea to begin with. So look, guys, here's just to explain the point, and then we're gonna go and implement that really in the system. Just imagine that you have brokers, which is your integration point, and your broker has some class in there. Here's an interface. I'm gonna call it iBroker, and I have also something else in here that's I'm gonna call broker, right? And my iBroker does something. So here is void foo like this. And this broker here, that's your implementation, is iBroker. And this guy implements foo like that. And I'm just going to put in here, this is how we're going to know that we did the right thing. I'm going to write a line in here and say hello, something like that. Okay. And this broker needs to be called by a service, which is exactly what we're going to do. And we're going to talk about the structure in a second for those who are not familiar with the standard. And in the service, I'm going to just create a quick I service like this. And here is my service as well. This is a big piece that we have to learn about dependency injection, and that I think you guys are gonna find quite entertaining. So here's another foo, and this guy here, however, calls in, so private read-only iBroker. There's your broker. If you do control period, it can generate a constructor for you. However, the constructor is really lame because it has scope in it when we want it to be like that, but that's a preference, right? And then I'm going to go here and say I service. So here it is. You're in a console application. This is not an ASP.NET. Hi, Vladimir. And it doesn't really show, like, you basically want to implement, and call the broker.foo like this, but where the heck are you supposed to inject that from? How is this going to work, right? So here's what we're going to do. We're gonna need to pull in the Microsoft extensions for dependency injection, right? So Microsoft dependency inject. There it is. Dependency. Come on. So there it is. The extensions for dependency injection right there. So I'm gonna install that. And just a favor from the people watching: if the screen is too small and you're not able to see the code, please let us know, and I'm gonna increase the size. We're gonna have to go to 175 after that point. I won't even be able to see the text myself. So here's the extension. And then I'm gonna go here and do a little bit of magic. So what's the trick that we want to do here to make this work for ourselves? I'm gonna go here and say var, like this, builder equal host. Should come in from the library, I think, I thought. Let's see, host. This is Microsoft extension hosting. Get that guy. Microsoft extensions hosting. There it is. Let's get that guy in. Cool. And then I'm gonna go to my console application here and say hosts. Here we go. And then create default builder. That's my default builder here, right? And now this default builder will allow me to go and add things just like you do in your ASP.NET application. So you can go and say, here's I want to configure my services. So configure services like this. And now you have your services, and watch this. Lo and behold, you can actually register things at transient iBroker will map to broker, just like that, right? So what that basically means is that you can really just, whatever services you have going on, and we're gonna need that piece very, very soon, to basically go and say I service, Hold on a second. My service. And here's my service here as well, just like that. Okay, but that doesn't answer our question really. Like the real question, um, uh, uh, the real question that we have here is the idea of I want to pass configurations without actually having a JSON file in there, right? So what I would do is that I would go up in here and create another folder. I'm going to call it models. And this is just for the sake of just kind of explaining a point. And I'm just going to say, I don't know, local configurations. And let's say your local configuration has a string API key like this, but it also has string organization name or organization ID rather, because that's really what it's going to ask of us. What that basically means is that your exposure layer, we can go now here and say services.add singleton. It can be anything we want. And I can go here and say, configs equal new local configurations like this. I can now easily just go and say, here is my API key, whatever, and then here's your organization ID, whatever. What that means that these configuration that will be passed in as input parameters, we can instantiate them and then later on use them in here as in the constructor. So I can go here and say local configurations. Is my local configurations. And I'm going to prove it here. So private read-only local configurations like this. And here's my local configuration equals local configurations. And then we're going to actually print whatever we passed in here. So local configuration dot organization name or whatever. That'll show us that what we actually injected have actually worked. Okay. I see a question here. Apna says, tell me the best source to learn .NET Core from scratch. Okay, Abna, are you familiar with C# at all? If you're familiar with C# at all, I'll tell you. So while we're doing that, let's just go back to this. So how do we prove this, right? How do I know that this is actually working the way it's supposed to? Like how do we test all that good stuff? Let's go up in here and go back to this var host equal builder build. And then now this host has everything in it, everything that we need really, right? So I'm going to initialize my service. So here is my service equal services get iService, and then I'm going to go here and say service.foo, just like that. So if this is true, if I run this application, everything will just fall into place. This is org ID. This is all in a console application. They didn't really start anything. So let's do this. Let's go and run this application, .NET run project. And here is my console application. I think that's .NET extension does not exist. What am I missing? Hold on. Let's see here. Well, ideally, the dependency one should get that for me for free, or so I thought. But it's possible that I'm missing something. Let's see. So this is building okay, and then I'm just gonna go and run this. Unless I built this in. Oh no, this is good. Object reference is not set to an instance of an object. Now let's see what we're missing here. So if I run this. So where is that in the organization ID? Okay, so the local configurations here. Let's see here. Is this guy coming in? This guy coming in as null. Why is this guy coming in as null? Let's find out. So configurations, I have this all set up. Host services get required service. This is good. Is it get service instead? Let's see. I could be missing something. Organization ID object reference. What am I missing, Brian? Any thoughts? Let's see. A transient. This is all good.
The
Services
constructor, do you have a this dot?
for the constructor.
Yeah, I don't think it'd matter.
It doesn't, but we should probably do it anyways, just so people kind of follow these best practices. Okay, this is iBroker, and I'm implementing this, so this is good. This is foo, this is great, and then this is local configurations. And here's my iService. It's probably going to be something really simple, but we're going to have to catch it. And this is your local configurations. This is all good. And there's program CS, configure services. This is all right. And host, create default builder. I don't think adding args here matters. I think it's optional. I'm going to put it here anyway. And here's host builder.build, and then this is my client, and I'm passing in the service. So let's put a breakpoint here and let's see if this approach works. It should work. So here's the service. So this service coming back as null. This guy actually didn't do the right thing. That's why. So why is this guy not doing the right stuff? Host builder build. Just gonna check a couple of things in terms of, yeah, everything here is right. Services, add singleton, configure services, host builder build, and get service. This all should be 100% correct. Okay, any ideas? Any ideas? Just trying to think here of what could possibly be the reason for this. New configuration, and here's my API keys. It's probably something really, really simple, but configuration, iBroker. What do you think? Does the service need to be public? Host create scope. Does the service need to be public? Well, let's see. Let's find out. I don't think it needs to be, but let's try.
I think the whoever's suggesting that we should create a scope, something's sort of triggering a memory there. I haven't had to do it with console.
Let's find out. So this is public broker, public class. Why is this guy complaining? Inconsistent accessibility for what? Oh, because of the configuration. So this is public as well. Let's try it. That could be the reason. There's also, is it the iService public? And iBroker public. Right. By the way, guys, just so you know, all of these things have to be made private, so they're not exposed to the outside world. But let's find out. Our services. Oh, you're not kidding. No, you are kidding. Local configuration. But wait, the service itself is not. The service itself is good. Is in good shape. Now let me just see if the local configuration also. No, all of this is good. Host services. So this guy should basically say the configuration is null, and it didn't come through. Let's see what the community is saying. You assigning injected property to itself. Is this free commercial for commercial purpose, or how does it work? Does the service registration order matter? No, it does not. It should not. What is free for commercial purpose? I don't know. Do you mean the API that we're building? The API itself, the OpenAI itself, is not for free. You have to pay money for it. But the Visual Studio, it depends on which version you're using. The Community Edition, I think, has some restrictions, but you're gonna have to buy a different version to kind of, if that's what you're asking about. Okay, where is this? That local configurations? Oh yeah, that's it. See, thanks.
I think
Thanks,
somebody
Rami.
somebody said that right at the start.
Yeah,
The,
someone
the
said that, and well, there's a lot of comments, so I missed it.
no.
Yeah, thanks, Rami. That's the one. So if I run this, thank you guys, appreciate it. So here it is. This is the org. right? So this is it. You know, we can register a bunch of configurations. We don't need to. So if the guy that you're initializing or your exposure layer is taking two parameters, you can register those and register all the services, and then you get going, right? This is a beautiful community engagement, by the way. Just they saved my butt big time. So okay, thank you, Rami. I appreciate it. Rami Abu Ghazala, appreciate it. So okay, so now let's go back to what we were talking about, right? Let's jump back to the blackboard here and let's just, explain how the system is going to be built from the ground up. We want everyone here to understand a couple of things. First of all, when we design our services, for those who are not familiar with the engineering standard, uh, we break our services into three main components, right? You have something called brokers, you have services, and you have exposers. And these exposers are basically what you actually interface with in any system. They could be APIs, they could be UIs, they could be anything you want, right? When you design every system this way, things become extremely clear in terms of test-driven development and design, because now you know which code needs to live in which place, right? You know exactly which part needs to hook up to the integration, which part needs to hook up to the business logic, which part do you need to unit test. By the way, not every single line of code that you write you need to test drive, believe it or not. As fundamentally we believe in test-driven development, not every single component that you will be building there will necessarily need to be test-driven. However, it will be tested, but not necessarily with unit tests. It will be tested with acceptance tests, integration tests. It depends on which part of the world you're in. In terms of your world, of course, you're basically testing that system. So if Parker and I are designing a system like this, imagine this. Imagine that OpenAI is sitting up in here. So this is OpenAI. And we need to build a library. So I need a broker. So let's just say this is we're working with the completion broker. So this would be completion broker. And this completion broker will have a completion service like this. And this completion service will have something in front of it called completions client. And this client is what you will be using in this library to be able to interact with the outside world, just like that. Okay, let's see here if we have any questions from the community about this theory, because to be honest with you, building the library, Brian and I could just go in the dark and build a library, right? But where's the fun in that? We want people to engage with us and all that. Let's see here. Justin says, yeah, I prefer local variables to have an underscore for the exact reason. Well, that's why there is a this. And by the way, just so you know, Justin, I think the underscore was kind of cargo culted, in the middle. Like if you look at, there's actually a nice issue about this. Let me kind of show this real quick. Um, yeah, exactly. So let's see here. So if you go to GitHub real quick, and if you go to C# standard, we brought this issue once, right? Someone talked about this once, and we talked about this. Someone said, hey, how come there is, I don't know if I closed this issue, honestly. Add section, null, field naming, is that it? Yeah, someone asked this. If you go back to the C# original documentation, this is how these things used to look like, before this was introduced to the C# world, right? People used to kind of distinguish these private fields by saying this underscore C. And then later on, in later versions of C#, this was actually introduced as a keyword. So this underscore was just a replacement for the period, for the dot that you put there. So some people thought, oh, that's how I'm supposed to name my private, class members, but it's not, right? That was just cargo culted, from a previous specification, right? And there's if you go to I'm gonna share this link with you guys. Here's the original C# language specification, just to see what the history is behind this, because I know a lot of people ask me that question. They say, hey, Hassan, why are you doing it this way? There is a reason for it. There's a reason this was introduced. There's a reason why we use things this way. And here's the specification, just so people know. I know that this is a very common thing in the .NET world. I saw some people say to me, well, the ASP.NET Core team is doing it this way. Well, the ASP.NET Core is just human beings, just like the rest of us. And, a lot of them just graduated out of college. Thanks, Ahmed Fuad. I already added it. Thanks. I appreciate it. So this is how it used to be. And then this period was introduced. So this underscore is no longer needed, was no longer needed for these specifications, right? If you want to kind of go back in history and see how all of this have started. Okay, let's go back to our design session here. Let's see. Let me know if you have any questions about this. Okay, so you have dependencies and you have services and have exposers, and these exposers basically going to be the client. And what Brian and I are going to be doing is exactly that. We're going to go build these brokers, and these brokers will integrate with the API, and then it will call the API and pull back, data for us. And this data, we're going to basically test drive. We're going to build the services. We're going to make sure that we're handling all the exceptions that are coming out of that API. So when you build something serious on top of this, you know that it's actually, built on top of solid foundation or something that you actually can trust. Someone left a question here. This is Akash Gupta. Completion broker is similar to repository communicating. Yeah, but we use brokers instead of repository because repository is very exclusive to storage, but broker is much wider than that. Like you can say email broker, storage broker, service bus broker, event broker. You can use this. It's much wider, right? And the more and more you try to simplify your design terminology, the easier it is for people to be able to pick up your architecture and your existing system and be able to contribute to it. And just for the people who are watching us right now, if you've never ever worked with open source, this is your chance. You're seeing a project literally unfold in front of you when we're creating a bunch of issues. Some of these issues may be called code rub or a quick fix or a medium fix. Pick that up and run with it, or just join us in the session through the standard community. We always drop the link in there and people will be able to see it and have fun with it. Okay, so just Brian, do you have anything to add on top of this, just to kind of before we kind of start?
No, I know where you're going, so I'm good.
Just for the
Yeah,
people
so
watching.
yep, we're going to get into how we bring those the settings into a DLL, an SDK. Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so how do we even do this? How do we start with this completion broker? Right? How do we even start kind of thinking about how this completion broker is going to look like and all that good stuff? Well, first of all, we need to know how it works, right? And in order for us to know how it works, we need to go to the API reference. And this API reference is right there. Let's go over here. Here's the API reference. Here we go. And let's see here. So here's the API. Is this the same one that you were looking at, Brian?
Yep.
I don't know.
I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
So, okay, API reference, there is the authentication part, which is they made it super easy and simple. You really just pass a key, and you generate the key. And for those who don't know how to generate the key, if you log into the openai.com, you will see that, you have your personal, you have your settings, usage, and then you can generate keys, and you can start generating these keys. And we will walk through that in our integration tests. Okay, so this part here mandates that we have something called an API broker, something that can take these secrets and work with it, right, Brian? I think that's the trick for it, right? So
Yep.
let's go build that, right? And before I move on to this, Brian, you said you added something in the completion
Yeah,
tab.
I was looking at the API and I started building out the model that we're going to have to use.
Nice. I
Yep.
appreciate that. There you are. So that's the model. And this model, basically, just so people understand, it really reflects exactly what the specification is. So you have the specification. Someone might say, where did you get these specifications from? If you go up in here, it literally just says, here's the model that I want you to push. So Brian basically went and picked up this, and he said, I need to turn this into a model. Go ahead, Brian.
What you're selecting there on the right is actually a subset. On the left there, it actually specifies all the different fields.
These are the ones, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
There's a lot more there than what's in that.
Nice.
The
So
only
we have,
one I want to have a little discussion about is one of them there is a map towards the bottom, and how to, we have to go from JSON here to C sharp. Which one was the map?
Let's see the map. Like, you mean the stream?
No, keep going down. I think it's further down. That one. There we go. The
Wait,
logit, the logit
oh,
bias.
logit bias. Okay.
Yeah, and I didn't know quite sure how to map that to C sharp, so I went with a dictionary. I'm wondering if it is really a dictionary.
You know what we can do? We can do it the other way around. Like, when you get kind of if you're not sure about the model that you're working with,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can always just, like, do it the other way around and let that, Newton soft, JSON serializer kind of give you the option.
Mm-hmm.
We could do that too, right? Um, okay. So before we do any of that, we need to actually initiate our API broker, right? That's before everything and anything. Let's do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna go back here. So just so people understand, I'm creating Vasu Gupta says, dictionary, you're in the right track there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's do that. So we need brokers. So here's the brokers. Oh, we already created that folder, didn't we? Let's see. I just need to pull it in. So here's the folder, here's brokers, include in project, and then under that, I'm gonna call it OpenAIs. And why OpenAIs? Because it's a namespace. So it has to be plural. If it's not plural, then we have a big problem, right? Um, Under this one in here, there might be a little bit with some of these projects, but whatever your business logic is, we really have to make it plural. So I'm just gonna go here and say OpenAI broker. Let's start from the interface. Here's OpenAI broker, right? And well, fine. I'll make the AI uppercase I. I'm a little finicky about these things. I have to make sure that it's exactly the way we expect it to be. And this OpenAI broker, this main one doesn't have anything in it, not just yet. But later on, we're gonna add some fun stuff to it. And then also we want the AI broker, the API broker, the concrete class. So let's go here and say OpenAI broker, and this one will also be partial, like this. And I think I need the copyrights here, Brian. Let's do this in here.
I see you're
Once
making them. I'm sorry to
go ahead.
interrupt. I see you're making them public. Do we want them public or do we want them internal?
We actually don't, but if was the problem that we just solved, was it because these things were public, or is it because I was just doing the wrong thing with the? No, you're right. We're gonna have to make them internal. So why don't you tell us why they're supposed to be internal? Go ahead.
Myself, okay, we don't need to expose to the public or anyone else any of the methods that we're doing to get. The only thing we need to expose is what's in the exposure layer. So
Right. Well,
yeah.
how is your unit test supposed to see these methods then? Well, then you're hiding it.
so so there's a way of as we've learnt, there's a way of sharing the assembly to
That's
the
right.
unit test project and making it all the internal stuff visible to it.
And we will show you guys this trick really, really soon, because your unit test project is fundamentally different than your core project. So what that basically means that if you make something like this internal, how are you supposed to mock it? How are you supposed to have access to it? There's a trick to it. And if you can't wait for the trick, just go back to my YouTube channel and see Assemblies as Friends. It's a really nice video there that shows you exactly how to do these things. Okay, so let's go back to this. So what I want to do, well, I want to create the models, and inside the models, I'm going to create something called configurations. And inside the configurations, I'm just going to create API configurations like that. Okay. And then I'm gonna go here and add in, just like I did earlier. I want an API key like this, and I want the organization name. And I don't know why I keep skipping the organization ID, something like that. So Control KE will clean that up. And if you go up here and do Control period, it will add in the copyrights for you. Get yourself very customized and kind of comfortable with shortcuts because it'll make you a faster engineer. You can write code really, really fast if you know these shortcuts. And then it becomes a habit. I know a lot of engineers kind of overwhelm themselves. They look at the Microsoft kind of cheat sheet and they basically the Visual Studio cheat sheet and they basically say, oh my God, I'm not going to remember all of these. No, just take one at a time and use it every day. And that's how you start building up that skill set for knowing these skill set. Like you can do a lot of crazy things with with Visual Studio. Like like I do Control Alt Shift right, and I can do Alt Shift period, and I'm selecting every strings, and now I'm operating on 2 lines. If I want this to be string like that, I can do a lot of great things, right? Okay. All right, let's go back to this. Okay, so let's go to our API, and our API needs private read-only API configurations because we're going to initialize this guy from whatever we pass in. So
Yep.
configurations. There you go. Cool. And then the AI is basically writing the rest for me. So that's fantastic. So see, even the AI is generating it with this dot, not underscore. How cool is that? I'm just messing around. I'm pretty sure if I did it with an underscore, it'll know what it's doing. So so that should be okay. And why is this guy complaining? It's saying method must have a return. This is not a method though. I think Visual Studio is going nuts. Oh, it's just OpenAI broker. Yeah, don't trust AI. AI is bad. I know this is the last thing you want to hear on a video like this, but AI is bad. It's just misleading me. Okay, so I have these configurations, and we talked about how we're going to implement this. We're going to pass this. Now I need to introduce you to another library that's really, really cool, which is the library that does the API communications. Remember that library, Brian? It's a pretty good library.
Yeah, I remember struggling with it a bit at first.
Brokers, initialize, configurations. So I'm just creating a branch here just so I don't lose things. But I'm gonna go up in here. If you guys look up, if you're not familiar with this library, this is a great time for you to find out. It's called RestfulSense, right? It's like a lot of the million other libraries. It has 88,000 downloads, almost 100,000 downloads. It's a really cool library that converts it doesn't just do the API communications for you, but it does something even more important than this. It turns the errors that are coming from APIs, like if you're getting a 404 or 405 or 403 or 500, it turns that into a meaningful exception, right? So it takes that and turns it into an actual exception that you can handle in your C# code. And you'll see a lot of cool things that this library is doing. It has codes. If you're building an ASP.NET controller, it has a lot of the missing codes that you can handle. Go back to the just for the team here to see. Go back to RestfulSense, and here is the RestfulSense GitHub. Super popular library. We use it all the time. We use it in big enterprise systems, and it has all the things that you might need, to kind of do to be able to actually execute a successful API calls. Okay. Okay. Let's go back to our code here. So what do we want to do with this? I want to initialize my RestfulSense API broker factory and be able to communicate through that, right? Brian, is that the deal, right?
Yep.
What do you think? So so what's the first thing I want to do here? I want to basically go and say, in order for me to execute a successful API call, right, I need to call this API. And in order for you to call this API, you need to call RestfulSense, right? Let's create RestfulSense instance with us here together here. So private read only, RESTful API factory client. So that's my RESTful API factory client, right? I'm just going to call it API client because that's a better name. API client like this. I also want an HTTP client, so let's create one. So this is my HTTP client, like this. Okay, this HTTP client will help us kind of, set up all the URLs, all the little pieces. Oh, you know what, Brian? We should probably set in the configurations as well, the URL, because we want the API URL to be also configurable. just in case someone wants to hit not necessarily the production OpenAI endpoint. We wanted to, let's do that. So I'm going to go here and say prop string API URL. What do you think about that? So that's how we're going to pass this URL, for the HTTP client, and now this HTTP client will know what to do with it for the rest of the day, right? Okay, so now this guy is no longer a fat arrow. It's something a little bit more sophisticated than that, because now we need to kind of think about how we're going to create this HTTP client, how we're going to initialize it, and all that good stuff, right? So let's do this. Let's go here and say, okay, this.http client equals setup HTTP client. I'm basically just going to go ahead and set up my HTTP client. I need to create a method in here that does that for me. The method. And I'm just going to go up in here and say this.http client equal new HTTP client. And this HTTP client needs to take a base URL, which we're going to fix in a second. So this.http client.base URL. And this base address will be this.local configurations, which API configurations dot API URL. Right? I think that's the deal here, right? And
I
because
think you have to cast it to a URI.
Oh yeah, that's right. New URI. Thanks, Brian. Like this. Okay. So we're setting up this client in here. What I can do though is that, hold on, I don't wanna remove the read only. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna go and say var HTTP client equal, and then I'm gonna take this HTTP client here and set it up in here. And then I'm gonna do, and you can simplify this. So instead of doing it this way, you can just say simplify, right? And then we can go here and say new URI this. There you go. Something like that. Like this. And what I want to do, why don't I just return this whole thing? That'd be much better. I see a lot of people do this still. You don't need this. You don't need this anymore. We used to.
A formatting question for you, Hassan. Can you fat arrow that now?
Can I format it?
Can
Like
you
control?
fat arrow that method now?
I can't because it's multi-lines.
Mm.
If it has multiple lines like this, it becomes harder to do that. Farouk says set up HTTP client have to a param. Have to a param. Wrong usage. Okay. It's always a good idea to make implementation sealed just for suggestions. Thanks, Ahmed. Sure. Okay, so we're setting up the HTTP client. Now what I want to set up is this factory guy. Right? So let's go and do this. So private RESTful API factory client, and then here set up API client. What's that going to look like? Right? The client itself, let's start from there. I can easily basically just go and say, really, it just need the HTTP client. So I could just say new RESTful API factory client this.http client like that. And if that's the case, would it make sense for us to just kind of move it into the constructor itself? Either way, I'm fine. I don't care. It should be either way. It should be okay. So if I go here and say this dot API client equal setup API client like this, and that's that. What do you think? So I have a question here. Vaso says, Vaso Gupta, he says, could you not use refit interface and set up HTTP? Yes, I can. It's probably what we're gonna do later on if we Yeah, I am using my own library. That's right. So but also the HTTP client is your existing HTTP client. We can inject that, but I want every broker to have its own configuration. I won't want that to leak outside at the configuration level or the exposure layer. I'll explain that piece in a bit. But Parker, do you have any?
Oh, I'm good.
Okay, if that's the case, you do Control MO, it's going to collapse most of these things for you. What I'm going to do here is very important. This is this coming piece here. We're just setting up really just basic operations that API, calls require, like get all, retrieve, the put, post, all of these basic primitive HTTP verb operations can be done this way. So let me just show you how that's being done, right? So for starters, let's just start with the get, for instance. So I'm just going to go here and say public like this, and I'm going to say, oh, we can make it private because just it's inside this class, so we don't want it to actually be exposed, right? So async value task, and here's t, get async of t, right? So you're just calling and you're saying, hey, I want to get something, right? And here's my relative URL, and I hope AI just stops doing this craziness. And you can just do just API client.get content async this t, and you're passing in the relative URL just like that. So I need to await this. Here you go. Done. This is like a generic function. And this function doesn't really target any particular type. And we're going to use that later to do partial classes that pull existing, like a completion model and, existing kind of many different types of models, right? And just so you know, Brian, one particular challenge that we're going to be working with is uh, their APIs don't have pure contracts. What that
No.
basically means is that you can post an apple and get an orange, right? It's going to be interesting. I have some ideas, but it's an interesting topic to kind of talk about and think about in terms of the, how are we gonna make this really work? Okay, private async value task t, and then post async of t, right? And this time we want two things. I want the actual content. I love that this guy just knows. Look, it even learned my API too. How crazy is that? Cool. And also, I want all of them, right? So I'm just going to go and say private async value task t, and then put. Usually, I just tell people put what you need, but if you want to do it this way, that's fine too. Put
Yeah,
content async.
I'm not sure if we need a put for this.
We won't need put, right? Well,
No,
if
I
you're
did.
doing fine tuning, do you update or do you just post?
Oh, I haven't done the fine tuning, so really don't know. Sorry.
I also know that there is a delete, right? So you have delete async, right? And that's pretty much, you're just, pushing a particular relative URL and you're basically saying delete. The delete is also available when you create your own fine-tuned model and you need to delete it.
Okay.
Okay. So this is basically just us setting up really just an entire kind of broker just to give us all these primitive operations. We're going to use these primitive operations later on to work with completion and stuff like that. And Brian, I can tell you this 10 times out of 10, we're going to end up in this overload where you have T request and you have T result. And thank God for Shemi Witt's handler, because he proposed this change to the API and now we can do this.
hmm Nice.
I will leave it in there because I know we're gonna need it. So I'm just gonna go like this because because even OpenAI API is not standard compliant. So I know that it's gonna have some fun, in it, right? So here's what I'm gonna do: private async value task, and I'm gonna say t result like this, and then I'm gonna say post async, and then this is T request. Do I have to put both of them in here? Do you know?
Yes.
String relative URL and then T request. There you go. I love AI. It's crazy, dude, the stuff that it's doing. We haven't exceeded 120 characters. We are at 111, so it's okay to do it this way. I know that we're gonna need this, so I'm just putting it out there for now. Okay.
When did you do the T request changes to the library? Must be
Oh, a
pretty.
long time ago. A long, long, long time ago. You know, if I say a year, it's probably a little bit more than that.
Yep.
So any questions from the community? We basically built, by the way, what I built in here, that can apply to literally any API in the world. You can use this to call any API that has absolutely nothing to do with OpenAI specifically. Not at all. But I did miss something that's very important. Brian, can you guess? Can anyone in the channel guess? What did I miss? I missed something really, really important. Let's go back here to the documentation, just to show people, and let's see who's awake and who's asleep. Let's see. So, what did I miss here? I missed something really, really important, you guys. What could it be?
We're not configuring the API. We're not configuring the HTML for the headers.
JX just said it, and yes, Brian, we didn't do the auth. We didn't do the auth. Some people said cancellation token. Some people said what is value task. Exactly, the auth. Exactly. Thank you, Joseph. Thanks, JX. So yeah, the auth. How are we gonna do the auth, man? You know, how are we gonna make this work? Brian, I've been hogging the keyword. Do you wanna try
No,
it?
no, no. No, I'll leave it with you, to be honest. I'll be a lazy bugger this morning.
So putting in the auth is the easiest thing in the world. All you gotta do really is just go back into your HTTP the HTTP client that we created. So this is my HTTP client, and I can just go up in here. Just can add headers, right? Let me do this. Our HTTP client, like this. Headers, authorization, right? And then you just add the value, and we're done. Something like that, I think. And then I just return HTTP client. Yeah, so Farouk, the HTTP status exception handling that happens in this library, and it takes care of it, and it throws a meaningful exception for you, and we're gonna handle that at the foundation service layer. Just so you understand, this is a question for Farouk. It says, what about status HTTP exception? So Farouk, how we kind of do this, and I'm gonna show you some existing applications that we do this with. Check this out, man. You know, this is the RestfulSense. And RestfulSense basically picks up literally every that's the beauty of this library. It basically picks up the error code and converts it to an exception for you. Right? And later on, we catch that exception and we convert it to whatever we want. I'll show you real life applications that we have that is doing this today. If you look at, I don't know, DMX Core. Here's a project that I was building with the mixed reality team at Microsoft. And if you look at the API, if you look at the foundation services, and let's look at something like, I don't know, labs or something like that. Labs, if you look in here, look how we're doing this. We're catching, let's see, oh, this is dealing with the database. I want the one that's dealing with external labs. There you go. So external labs, watch this. We catch HTTP response URL not found exception, HTTP response unauthorized exception. All these little things, you know, that you talked about, we can put in there. Someone also added this comment. That's a great point, Vincent. We need to add the organization ID. The organization ID is optional, but we should add it anyway, and we need to kind of be aware of that it's not mandatory, but we need to add it anyway. That's a good point. Thank you, Vincent. So headers, add, right? And what's the name of that guy? It's organization ID. Where do we get that name from? We get it from the documentation. Let's go back to the documentation real quick. Over here. And OpenAI organization. That's the name of it. Of course, Farouk. So let's take that. Let's go back here. Let's do this. Here's the guy. Let's go to here. I love how this community is like, hey dude, you forgot this piece. Here's that's what I love about this. What do you think, Brian? This is great, right?
They keep us on our toes.
Like the whole it's, it's API configuration organization ID. There you go. Now let's make this a little bit cleaner because now it started to look a little weird. So I need to add, never ever add random values like this. At least put the variable name next to it. And then
You
the
need a
same thing
you need a
applies.
semicolon at the end of that line, mate.
Yes, sir. There you go. Oop. There you go. Right. So technically that API should work. And we're gonna find out very soon. If not this session, the next session. We're gonna be building an API broker, and we're gonna be able to kind of initialize this. Okay. The same thing should probably apply to this one. I don't know what would be URI string. Cool. Okay. All right. I'm gonna do Control MO, which is gonna collapse the world like this. And I'm gonna see, Brian, do you have any comments, anything, guys in the community, anything I'm missing for before we create a pull request? Anything? I think should be solid. Okay, let me do a rebuild real quick. Brian, I've been seeing this recently. Visual Studio gets stuck somehow in the middle of the rebuild. Like every time you try to rebuild, it gets stuck in there, in the middle.
I'm not seeing that one. It's you. It's your machine.
Could be it's my machine. Let's see here. Does that library you're using somehow handle the HTTP client web handlers? I thought best practices was to use iHTTP client underneath. I mean, I don't know. Did I underneath this library we're using HTTP client factory? I know this for sure. Let me double check. I don't want to lie to you. Let's double check. So if I go into this guy, let's see here. RestfulSense assembly. By the way, Brian Parker built one for also WebAssembly, guys. If you're not familiar, if you're using a web application that is server-side Blazor, Brian, keep me honest with this. Joseph asked this question a couple of times. What is value task? I'll explain that in a second, just before I forget for this stream. So let's find out. The cool thing is this thing is open source, so we know exactly. So if we go into clients and I look into a RESTful API client factory, am I using HTTP client factory? I don't think so. I'm taking the HTTP client itself and I'm working with it. I could swear we were using HTTP client factory at some point in time. So Justin says this is gonna help with to avoid socket exhaustion and DNS update issues. Well, here's the good news. Justin, if you want, create an issue on this repository, and I'll be more than happy to kind of switch over to RESTful, the HTTP client factory. I could swear I am, but I'm just looking really fast in here, so it may not be there. Is this the same thing that we did here? HTTP client. Yeah, if we want to switch HTTP client factory, I'd be more than happy to do that. It's a good point. And then I know Rami, I'll come to you in a second. Let's see what is value task. Value task is short for value or task. So if the value is available already, it doesn't have to play tricks. It doesn't have to play trickery on the compiler and pretend that it's waiting for something. So if you are trying to retrieve a name of a student and the name is already available in memory, it'll just hand it over to you. It's not going to tell the compiler, oh, wait, let me go get the student name. It's already there. Value task is super fast. It's much faster than task. Value task executes in 50 nanoseconds. What that basically means is just half the time that it would take to execute task, right? So that's my short version of it. Otherwise, I'll just have to make a YouTube video or a blog post about the whole thing. And then Rami Abu Ghazala says, I use NSWAG to generate an API client which throws a generic API exception which I can catch and handle depending on the response. So Rami, the question for you is, see that the problem is with that generic exception, right? It's not specified to particular errors. We covered all the errors that could possibly come out of an API. Farouk says 80% you need to use value task in real life. Yes. Someone, by the way, just so you guys know, someone challenged me the other day. Someone said to me, hey, value task doesn't give you any advantage in terms of performance. So I was like, okay, challenge accepted. And I basically, I basically went and said, was it many to many? It was a completely uh, unrelated topic. And he put the question in there. So he said, let's see, wrong relation. I probably, where did I put it? Let's see. Uh, Many to many Cosmos OData without EF. I don't remember which one he asked me the question, and it was basically a big thing about, hey, you don't really maybe he deleted it. I don't know what happened there. But I'm pretty sure it wasn't the many to many. And in that kind of issue, we ran a .NET kind of performance test, and value task kicked some serious ass when it came to the performance compared to task, even when you're awaiting it. So definitely use value task, except for tests. XUnit doesn't understand value task yet. They have the PR merged in, they just didn't release it yet. So unfortunately, in our unit test, we can't use value task. If you use value task in your test, it will always give you this false positive that your test is passing all the time because it's handing a value, and the test framework doesn't understand it, so it will always say pass, pass, pass. That's the only place I can think of right now, and maybe win all when you're using win all, right? When you're doing task win all, that's probably another place you could use it. Yeah. Okay, let's go back to this code. AS says if half the code needs to run in main thread, then use value task. Sure. I I didn't go that far. Okay, I'm gonna make a commit. So I'm gonna go here and say brokers initialize API broker. Now watch this cool thing. I can do a hash in here and it will auto complete for me. Can you guys see this? That's pretty cool. I don't even need to go to the pull request. I can just find what I need to do in here, right? And this doesn't actually fit configure and register API secrets. I'm gonna put it in its own kind of issue so we are kind of a little bit more organized. So I'm just gonna go here and say OpenAI, and then I'm gonna go to the project, and I'm gonna go to OpenAI project, and I'm just gonna create a new item in here. I'm gonna say brokers, initialize API broker. And then I'm gonna click on draft. I'm gonna convert this to an issue. And now I should be able to kind of see it in real time in Visual Studio. So let's go here. Brokers. It didn't catch it yet. Oh, wait. Yeah, it didn't catch it yet. Let's wait till we create the pull request then. I don't know if they're preloaded, they cache them in. I don't know what's happening there, but they're definitely
might come through with a fetch.
might come with a fetch. That's right.
Yeah.
Here we go. Let's create a pull request. And here is my web page. And then I'm gonna do closes. You have to say closes. Initialize API broker. Here's the API broker. Okay, so take a look at the code that we created here. Very interesting stuff. We created a model. We kind of added a new library, and then we started to kind of implement these methods that we're going to use later to kind of interface with OpenAI. What do you think, Ryan? Should this be enough for today?
I think it should. I think the next bit's going to be pretty chunky.
Next bit's going to be very, very chunky, and there's going to
Yeah.
be a lot of questions. Like I know there's going to be a lot of things where Brian, since you're a contributor, you're gonna have to approve it. I can't actually merge this, even if I'm the owner of the thing, unless you approve it. Okay, while Brian is doing this, while I'm merging the code, I'm gonna send up in here the URL for the pull request, just for people to kind of take a look at what we're doing. If you don't have that URL yet, please just go ahead and Brian, did I talk about the standard calendar? I did talk about the standard calendar,
You did?
right?
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Um, um,
Yeah, that's still going
okay.
through. I can't approve it yet. So
Awesome. So while this is building, any final remarks, Brian, anyone in the community? Was this a little bit useful? I hope this is useful for you a little bit. Hope you learned something new, taught me something new. Anything at all? Okay. All right. So keep an eye on this community calendar, because this is how we're gonna you're gonna keep track of the next sessions. If you're subscribed to this YouTube channel, you'll be notified that there is a new stream that's gonna come up. Usually Brian and I, ideally the plan is to do it every day, right? Brian, we want to do it every day.
yep,
Uh,
we'll
but
get it done.
but if we can't, we'll definitely put the calendar and the schedule and just start to stay consistent, until we get it to a completion. All right, my friends. Brian, thank you so very much for hanging out with me today. It was a little bit of a rough start, but we got there.
No worries.
And just to think for the people watching, see, 22 years I've been doing this and I still forget things. It's much more fun when you're coding with people. People will kind of show you and kind of open up your eyes so you don't keep spinning in circles, And before I go, Sir Malov is saying, what is a broker? A broker is like a liaison between you and the outside world. Go to the standard in here and read about brokers. Here's a link for you. This is what we build the system according to. Here's the broker. And read the standard. It's a free copy. You can get it for free. There's a PDF copy attached to it. And thank you all for watching. See you later. Thank you, Brian.